A cold, gray sky over the Arctic. Somewhere in northern Russia, an early warning radar sweeps the horizon. Quiet, routine. Until a new signal blooms across the scope. A fast rising object. High altitude. Unusual trajectory. For a few seconds, it's just a dot. Then, the computers begin drawing the only story they know how to draw. Possible missile launch. In Moscow, phones start ringing in secure rooms. Commanders are pulled from meetings. A country that's supposed to be past the Cold War suddenly behaves like it's still inside it. Because the worst part isn't what the object is, it's what it could be, if it's the first move of a nuclear attack. January 25th, 1995. A Norwegian-American science team launches a civilian research rocket, Black Brant 12, from Andøya in northern Norway. Norway had sent notifications about the launch campaign, but in the first minutes, Russia's warning chain still treats the signal like a threat. And that creates a terrifying question with a deadline. Do you treat it like a test, or like the start of a war? This is the story of the day the world drifted closer to nuclear escalation than almost anyone remembers, when Russia's early warning alert reportedly climbed all the way up to the level of President Boris Yeltsin's nuclear command briefcase system, the Cheget. In the next minutes, we'll rebuild exactly why the rocket looked dangerous, how the decision window shrank, and why false alarms are never just technical glitches. Then, near the end, we take one controlled alternate turn, about 15% of the story, where a single assumption doesn't get corrected in time. Because the real lesson of 1995 isn't, "That was scary." It's that modern safety sometimes depends on one fragile thing: interpretation under pressure.
The telemetry readings are fluctuating again.
Must be the cold.
The rocket itself wasn't a weapon. It was a research launch, built to carry scientific instruments high into the atmosphere, then fall back into the sea. But early warning systems don't see intent. They see shape and behavior. On January 25th, 1995, the Black Brant 12 lifts off from Norway's Andøya launch site and climbs hard into the dark winter sky. It's fast, it's high, and for a short time, it behaves like something far more sinister than a civilian experiment. Because the first stage rise, straight up, accelerating, looks like the opening seconds of a missile trajectory. And then comes the part that matters most. At altitude, the rocket's path and separation profile can resemble the two-stage signature that warning operators are trained to treat with caution. An object that might be trying to confuse or outrun the way you normally track threats. Russia's northern radar network is designed to do one thing above all else: give decision-makers time. Time to identify, time to confirm, time to respond, if it's real. But in the mid-1990s, Russia's early warning coverage had gaps. Some systems were degraded after the Soviet collapse, and the country was deeply sensitive to the idea of a surprise first strike. Those two facts together create the worst possible psychological equation. Low confidence plus high stakes equals assume the worst. And this launch had a particularly scary storyline if you're viewing it through Cold War logic. Because one plausible scenario is not a single warhead. It's a setup. A high-altitude burst over the sea, an electromagnetic pulse meant to blind radars and communications for the opening minutes of a larger strike. That's why, for a critical window, the question wasn't, is this rocket dangerous? The question was, is this the beginning of a sequence you won't be able to stop once it starts? And if you're wrong, if you wait too long, history punishes you. So the alert climbs, and the clock starts shrinking. In nuclear history, close calls rarely look dramatic. They look procedural. A dot appears on a scope, a supervisor is called in, A phone line opens, a report moves up a chain, and each step is designed to answer one question. Do we have enough certainty to treat this as real? But certainty is expensive. It takes time. And the entire point of early warning is that you don't have much of it. From detection to impact, an intercontinental missile flight is measured in tens of minutes. That's where the tension comes from. Not because leaders want to act fast, because they're afraid of acting too late. So, when an unknown object rises over the Norwegian Sea and the system can't immediately explain it, the logic becomes brutally simple. You either classify it, or you prepare for it. This is where the 24 minutes idea lives, not as a single official timer everyone stares at, but as a shrinking corridor of options. Option 1. Identify the launch as harmless before it creates panic at the top. Option 2. Assume it could be a first move and elevate readiness, because if it's real, hesitation is how you lose. And here's the trap. Once you elevate readiness, you create momentum. More people are pulled in. More units are put on alert. More systems are switched to wartime posture. And every new person who hears the report inherits the same pressure, but with less time to resolve it. That's how inevitability is manufactured, not by propaganda, by procedure. In the real 1995 incident, reports indicate the alert climbed high enough that Russia's nuclear command system, the kind associated with the presidential briefcase, was activated in response. The details vary by source, but the core point is stable. The system treated the launch as serious enough to raise the national command posture. And at the top, the decision is never press the button. The decision is, do we posture for retaliation? Do we disperse leadership? Do we move forces into a stance that makes later restraint harder? Because if you guess wrong in one direction, you look paranoid. But if you guess wrong in the other, you don't get a second guess. So, Moscow watches the track and waits for the moment where uncertainty becomes a verdict. What saved the real timeline wasn't courage. It was clarity arriving before posture became commitment.
The track is turning.
As the rocket climbed, the tracking story began to change. The path wasn't bending toward Russian territory. It was arcing out over the sea, high, fast, and then steadily away from the country's critical zones. That matters, because early warning isn't just looking for a launch. It's looking for an attack profile, something headed toward you, something that separates into pieces the way a strike package would, something that fits the pattern operators have feared for decades. For a few minutes, this launch could be misread as the opening of that pattern. But as more sensors locked on, the frightening interpretation got weaker. The object didn't multiply into a cloud of independent warheads. It didn't behave like a coordinated strike. It behaved like a research rocket, a steep climb, a separation, and a trajectory that was never coming for Moscow. And behind the scenes, another fact mattered. Norway had issued notifications about the scientific launch campaign. Whether every desk had the paperwork in front of them in that moment is a different question. But the existence of notification gave the system a non-apocalyptic explanation to snap onto once the trajectory confirmed it. So the chain slows down. Phones stop escalating. People who are being pulled into the crisis are told to stand down. And the world gets something it almost never gets in nuclear history. A false alarm that ends before it turns into an irreversible posture. The rocket splashes down where it was always meant to, but the aftershock stays. Because the terrifying part of January 25th isn't that anyone wanted a war. It's that a civilian launch created a window where war could have started by mistake. Here's the uncomfortable truth about early warning systems. They're not built to be calm. They're built to be fast. Speed is the product. Certainty is the luxury. When a launch alert appears, the system doesn't wait for perfect information. It starts assembling a story from fragments, radar tracks, expected flight profiles, separations, probability estimates, and it does it under one constant pressure. If it's real, you don't get a second chance. That pressure creates a predictable failure mode. Anything unusual becomes dangerous by default. A strange trajectory, a separation at the wrong moment, a gap in coverage, a delayed report, a notification that exists somewhere but not on the desk of the person staring at the scope. And in the mid-1990s, the human layer matters even more. Because the people inside those rooms aren't just reading data, they're reading history. They remember decapitation strike theories, surprise attack fears, and the nightmare scenario where the first thing you detect isn't the warhead. It's the move designed to blind you before the warheads arrive. That's why incidents like this don't need villains. They only need ambiguity plus a deadline. So the real lesson of January 25th, 1995 isn't a mistake was made. It's this. A modern civilization can drift toward catastrophe because two systems, technology and psychology, both do what they were designed to do under stress. And now we take one controlled alternate turn. Not a fantasy rewrite, just one assumption that doesn't get corrected in time. The system never gets the clarity it got in the real timeline. Now we take the controlled turn. Same day, same launch, same rising dot over the Norwegian Sea. But in this branch, one thing breaks at the worst moment. The interpretation never stabilizes. The track is still unusual, the separation is still ambiguous, and the confirmation that would normally calm the chain, clean trajectory certainty, clean classification, the harmless story snapping into place, arrives late, fragmented, or not at all. So the system does what systems do under uncertainty. It leans toward the scenario that punishes hesitation. Inside Russia's command chain, the posture climbs faster and stays elevated longer. Phones don't stop ringing, they multiply. Orders don't soften, they harden. A defensive stance becomes a readiness stance. A readiness stance becomes a posture that assumes someone else is already moving. And the most dangerous moment in any escalation isn't when someone chooses war. It's when both sides begin acting like war is already chosen because they can't afford to be the only ones standing still. In this alternate branch, the committee rooms and command rooms are filled with the same human problem. No one wants to be responsible for a mistake. But everyone is terrified of being responsible for a delay. So leaders do what leaders always do under this kind of pressure. They buy time by moving pieces. Air assets disperse. Communications go to higher security settings. Units are told to prepare for the possibility of the worst interpretation. And out in the world, outside the rooms with secure phones, people feel it in small ways first. Flights delayed. Bases tighten. A government that doesn't know the truth yet begins acting as if it does. Now here's the key difference. In the real timeline, the rocket's harmlessness becomes obvious enough, fast enough, that the attack story dies before it takes over. In this branch, the attack story survives long enough to become the thing everyone is reacting to. And once that happens, the 24 minutes stop being a window for identification. They become a corridor toward irreversible posture. A world where everyone's safest move is also the move that makes everyone less safe. Here's the lesson of 1995. Real timeline or alternate. The most dangerous disasters don't begin with fire. They begin with interpretation. A system sees something unusual. People inherit a story. And once the story becomes attack, every action starts to look like proof. That's why nuclear history is filled with the same quiet pattern. It's not the weapons that almost end the world. It's the window where humans must decide what the signal means before certainty arrives. In the real timeline, the rocket's track became clear fast enough for restraint to win. In the alternate branch, the track stays ambiguous long enough for posture to harden. And that's the part to remember in modern life. When pressure is high and time is short, procedure creates inevitability, even when the facts aren't settled. So the survival rule isn't be fearless. It's this. When you hear the word emergency, watch 3 controls. Information. Who can speak? Who can verify? Who can contradict? Movement. Who can travel? Who gets blocked? Who gets redirected? Legitimacy. Who looks lawful? Who looks inevitable? Who looks like the future that punishes resistance? If those 3 begin locking into one story, a temporary moment can become a permanent posture. Next episode, we go to a different hinge. Another day when the world misread a signal and held its breath. Subscribe, because in alternate realities, we don't just retell near misses, we learn how they happen, so we can recognize the next one.